Hello there, this is Bob Coppedge, and apologize for running a couple minutes behind. My fault, and I feel really, really bad about it. So, before I have to go into counseling, let's get started. This is actually the first of our webinars aimed at our latest practice, which is regarding data health and management. It's called Simplex-dba. And honestly, we're still putting some parts together, but Doug Tombo is going to be heading up that practice. We've actually been already doing that for some of our customers for the past couple of years. We're just kind of formalizing it and moving forward with it. And this is going to be the first of our monthly webinars on that topic. And to move forward a little bit, this is what we refer to as our NASCAR Slide, which has a whole bunch of the various forms and features and partnerships that Simplex-IT has. I found out actually yesterday that we are now a Microsoft Cloud Champion Tier 1 partner. I still don't know what that means, but we are that, as well as working with a whole lot of other vendors, and we have been recognized in the industry, MSP Mentor, both individually and collectively as a company, so yada, yada, yada. Still, our primary goal is to be the IT department or work with the IT department for small and medium businesses, so we have those issues. And as I mentioned, we've got these two new practices. Many of you have seen we've actually done 3 monthly webinars with Patty Smirk, who is heading up our Simplex-PM aimed at project management. This again is our first of our monthly for the Simplex-dba, focusing on data management and data health. And this is our upcoming calendar. As you can see, we're now up to 4 events each month, 3 webinars and 1 in-person luncheonar, and we're pretty proud of that. And this has the stuff that's coming. Again, all of these are free and open to the public, and we hope to see you there after this one. So I'm going to, with that, leave this over to Doug Tombo, who's going to take it from here.
Thank you, Bob. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for taking time out of your day to join us today. As Bob mentioned, this is the first of our web presentations on our Managed Data series and practice that we have at Simplex-IT here. Today, we want to talk about healthy data. And I'm hoping that most of you sat there and thought, great, what is healthy data? Because defining that is not the easiest thing to do. Most of us have data. Most of us have a lot of data. But actually putting our finger on whether the data is healthy or not is not that easy of a task to achieve. But in order to be useful, the data has to be healthy and reliable. It needs to be there when we need it, and it needs to provide us with the answers to the questions that we have about the data. It assists our operations strategically, operationally, but do we have confidence that our data is healthy? Do we proactively deal with the issues involving the data? Okay, so let's dig into it. In order to determine if your data is healthy or not, I feel that we could take a fairly structured approach on some unstructured topics. It all starts with the source of the data. Where does it come from? For any of you that have been involved with systems for any period of time, you may realize that there are nuances associated with every system that originates data. There were assumptions made by the programmers, there were decisions made by the marketing people, by the developers, and those nuances of the source system often appear in the data that we have. Okay, we have data coming in our system from all different directions. It comes in via text, it comes in via email, sometimes we get spreadsheets, we may get paper, we might have data in the cloud. Sometimes we have a web application where data is entered directly. Each of those systems is going to have nuances associated with it. Okay, the hard part about understanding these issues is the nuances usually aren't known, and we only see them at the back end of it. That is when we have the data. For example, let's take a very common way of collecting data these days. Let's say we have an online order entry system that was provided to us by a third party. Okay, it's a web application and allows our customers to connect to us and place orders. So the types of nuances that I'm talking about are things like the data model in the developer's mind when he created the application. What is a data model? That's a logical representation of the type of entity that we're attempting to describe with our data. Typically, with an order entry system, it's going to be customers and orders, which is generally products and services. But what if our web developer doesn't really have much of a business background? What if they were never involved in the good old days of data flow in a company that we used to call multi-part forms? How many people have a grin on your face when you hear the word the canary copy goes to purchasing? There was a reason for that, because data has to flow throughout an organization. It has to go to different departments, and it has to be approved at different phases. Often it's verified at those phases too. But with electronic data, and web applications in particular, the flow is not visible. And what you may find out is it doesn't even happen many times. For example, I know a company that has an order entry system that has difficulty distinguishing between a purchase order from the customer and an order from the customer. And the reason for that is because the web developers don't know the difference of them themselves. It's an order. But if you look at the details behind an order, there's actually a flow that goes to it. Generally, you request a quote from a supplier. Then you issue a purchase order to that supplier. Then they'll acknowledge the purchase order. Then you'll generate an order. Well, the web developers, in an effort to save time, made the application work in such a way that a purchase order became an order by changing a status field. That sounds great, and it's certainly going to reduce the amount of time it takes to move data in an organization, because in that case, we're not moving the data at all. We're changing one field. The problem with that is, think about the purchasing process itself. How many times do we get it right on the very first contact with the company? In the organizations that I've worked, what usually happens is an email flies out and people request generic information. Then they attempt to put it into QuickBooks or something like that and generate a purchase order, providing terms and things like that. It goes to the vendor reviews it, they update the pricing, maybe they change the terms. Often what happens is you have 3 or 4 documents going back and forth, typically in email. So what is the data that's relevant to the order? What I found it to be is it's the data that the person processing the order can get their hands on when they place the order into the system. That may not be an optimal solution. There may have been data that was lost along the way. So although we have an order, it may be in there with incorrect terms or pricing. These are the types of nuances that I'm talking about that are not easily discernible just by looking at your data. Okay, once we have the data in our system, we have to store it. We're going to put it somewhere, typically on our network, and it's going to be located somewhere. We need to know, we need to be mindful, and we need to understand how storage mechanisms work. Now, most of us have a file server, some of us have a database server, almost all of us have an email server. But knowing where our data is located is a big part of understanding, is it healthy? Because that has an impact on how easy it is to get to. Another topic that's related to that is, what format is the data in? My favorite is the free-form email message. Not even a list, it's just a paragraph with all types of topics mixed in there. And maybe the email subject header is related to a conversation that we had 2 weeks ago. And it says, hey, come on out to the picnic, but actually it's a replenishment order that's coming through the system. That's related to how easy is it to get to. When data is in your email system, it's, in my mind, very difficult to get to. Often all we have available to us to find it is the search functionality. And again, with people being under stress and hurried up and going back and forth to get an order complete or data exchanged to get an order, you may not have it lined up in the most easy to identify way. Now, when I search my Outlook email for an email message, I'm darn glad I use standard subject headings, but not everyone I communicate with does. So often I'll have to spend minutes, sometimes half an hour, sorting through emails to find it. But still, our data is stored at that point. It's just not stored in a very good place. Okay, let's talk quickly about storage systems. In the end, your storage system is just an electronic medium where data is stored. There's lots of them: USB stick, DVD, the cloud, a database. But typically what most of us have is just a file system. A file system on a file server. So the file server is going to have disk drives, sometimes one, often more than that. If you have a larger organization, you may have a device called a NAS, Network Attached Storage. That's nothing more than a device that has multiple disk drives in it, and it's accessible on the network. If you're in a larger company, you may have something called a SAN, Storage Area Network. Those tend to be pretty expensive. They're somewhere in the $10, $20, $120,000 range. Okay, there's pros and cons to all of them. But the most important thing to understand about your storage is that it will fail. Yes, the health of our data is immensely related to where our data is stored. Okay, most disk drives that are on the market these days tend to have roughly a 6% failure rate the first year. You can find all kinds of studies, and you could see that this vendor is better than that vendor. But what I've seen over the years, and many people agree, is that it goes in cycles. Seagate is doing very good with this specific model. Fujitsu is doing very good with that one. It comes and goes, and it's related to the production cycles. But what we need to know about that is if we care about having healthy data, we must recognize that our storage system is going to fail at some point. Some people don't realize, but data is subject to something called bit rot. When CDs and DVDs came out years ago, we were told that they would last forever. Some of us have discovered as we go back through our musical archive or pictures from 10 years ago that sometimes the files can't be opened. That's because data decays as it exists on media. Just sitting there on the shelf, your tapes are rotting. Your DVDs in your drawer are going bad. It's not just the sunlight that does it. It's the nuances of the storage medium. Well, what can we do about that? Well, first of all, we have to recognize that it does happen, and worst of all, we can't see it happening. So what we have to take away from that is we must change our storage every few years. The disk drives in our NAS are going to fail. Typically, you have a 3-year warranty on good quality drives, sometimes 5-year. But with that failure rate, what it is in the first year, we can't be guaranteed we'll get maximum life out of it. So I believe it's imperative that an organization have a strategy to refresh their storage on a regular basis. Now, if you don't have that much data, that's a very easy to do task. You get a couple more disk drives, you have a qualified technician install them in some type of protection scheme, a RAID array, and you move your data to it. But as the years go by, what we find is that we have faster and faster storage options available now too. So while we're at it, we may want to increase the speed of our storage. Now, there's a wonderful mechanism out there in the world called SSD, solid state drives, that allow you to achieve very fast read and write access on your data. The problem is they fail. When they first started becoming popular a few years ago, the failure rate on them was very high. These days it's a lot better, and what I've found is that newer SSD drives work very well with newer hardware. So put them in new servers, not old servers, and you're going to do well with that. But the most important thing with your storage to keep in mind is you must be cautious, because it will fail and all of your data will be there. You need to have a plan for that. Okay, another key concept in the health of data is the availability of it, the security related to it. In other words, can someone get physical access to it? We want our employees to have access to it. Typically we think of electronic access, but in some ways that's physical. We want people that are not authorized to not be able to access the data. That's where our security comes in. We have to balance the two, providing access to the authorized people and keeping the non-authorized people out. This is more of a challenge than it seems. Any of you that follow the industry, the data breaches that occur within the industry, we see that we have very, very large firms, primarily retailers, that their data is getting breached. Whether it's an internal employee making it available externally, or people with bad motives making it available from the parking lot and publishing it on the web, these are real issues that happen, and we need to be mindful of it. We need to balance the availability of our data with the security of our data. Okay, let's say the bad day comes and we need to restore our data. The first question that we're going to have is, where is the backup? If you work in a very structured firm, you probably have people dedicated to the task of maintaining the backups. Many of the clients that I work with have such people. And guess what? Sometimes the tapes that we use for offsite storage are sitting on their desk. Sometimes the next week they're on their desk, because most companies are understaffed. Everyone's going lean, getting by with less people, and we don't always get to all of our duties regardless of how important they are. But finding the backup is going to be our first challenge should we need to restore. Let's say we do find the backup. The next question you should be asking, but many of you may not know this, is can it even be used to restore? There's all kinds of numbers on this idea, but I can say from what I've seen in the industry over the years, the vast majority of backups cannot be used for their intended purpose. That is, they either cannot be restored at all, that's more common than we would like to know, or if we do restore with them, they don't contain what we thought. These days, you can back up an entire system, you can back up a file, you can back up a folder. We have a number of products here at Simplex that allow us to do all and take your pick when you go to restore. But you might find out what you actually wrote on the backup device, whether it's disk or tape, is not able to restore what you need at that exact moment. Let's say it does have it though, and things are looking good. How many people here can tell me how long will it take to restore your data? Usually it's longer than a couple of moments. If you're one of the clients that is set up so well that it's only a few clicks and you have your latest file, give yourself a pat on the back, because you're doing well towards achieving healthy data. Typically what happens is the whole process, the few steps that I've just covered here, it takes hours, and they're very tense hours. And people are upset and frantic, and very few of us perform our best when we're under that kind of stress. But let's say we do, and within 3 hours we're capable of restoring that one file that we were after. That's a long time for one file, but it's an important file, so no one's upset. We got it back. How can we verify that's the file we're actually after? How do we know it's not a prior version of the file that we're after? Finally, what other dependencies are there with this restored data? Some people run into a situation that a backup taken on one system can't be restored to a different system. Well, if you have a failure in one of your critical systems, you're going to need that ability to. Years ago, back when tape drive was the big medium for on-site backups, companies used to stockpile tape drives because they knew in 5 years the manufacturer wouldn't be selling them anymore. And they had to have the ability to restore from the medium that they had. That doesn't matter too much these days. Most of us are putting our backups on disk drives, And disk drives are generally universally connectable one way or another, not between different types of systems like Linux and Windows, but for the most part, if you're in the Windows ecosystem, you can generally get your data off of a disk. Okay, the most important point in a backup solution is, has it been tested? The health of your data is very much related to, can you restore it? Can you recover from a problem with it? Someone makes a mistake, you bring a temp in, they weren't sure, there's a bug in your program, delete, didn't ask if you meant it. You need to restore. Have you tested your restore? It's time consuming. It doesn't get you kudos from the boss that you're testing the restores. They're going to want you to move forward and produce more revenue, get more tasks accomplished, things like that. But it is imperative that you test your restores. It's the only way you can have confidence in them. Finally, you have cloud issues. If you're storing your data in the cloud, you may find that you're not in control of your data at all. Many companies have gone under because they put all of their data in the cloud, and then there was a problem with it. There's been some very high-profile cases in the last year where online web firms completely out of business overnight because a sysadmin made a mistake on the storage. They had one of the more advanced storage systems like SAN or NAS, but they didn't have one of the good recovery systems known as backup. People are out of business. Even on the personal level, photo websites where people put their family pictures and things like that. There have been cases where the company has decided that they have to go under for financial reasons or copyright infringement or something. I'll never forget the story where customers were advised by email they have 1 hour to download all of their pictures. How are you going to do that? How can you possibly get to that in time? Plus, you're competing with everyone else to download their data at the same time. Some of these people were professional photographers and they had edited photos out there. Very nice work. But you're basically competing with every other user that responded to the email, and a company that's going under generally doesn't have the ability to increase the download speed from their internet site. Okay, one more cloud issue to be very much aware of. Most of us are small and medium-sized businesses. That's a great place to be. Very good place to be. You get the best of both worlds. But if you have problems and your cloud provider needs to restore many of their clients, think about it. Who's going to be first on their list? In my mind, it's more than likely the company that pays them the most. Now, many of these cloud-based backup services only cost a couple of dollars a month, a couple of dollars per user, etc. But if you're on the same cloud provider that's holding your files for you that General Motors is, I'm pretty sure they're going to restore General Motors before the mom and pop flower shop. Things we need to be aware of. We need to be able to restore our data, and sometimes it's not even up to us whether we can or can't. So I hope I wasn't going too quick. We've talked about a number of topics, and some of them seem interrelated and some of them seem random. But the health of your data is actually the end result of many, many factors. And it's somewhat surprising to me, but to a large degree, it's people outside of our control. It's not just our employees, it's not just our internal systems, it's not just the mood of the people touching the data at any given time. It's the nuances. The nuances that we can't even see, that few of us are trained to observe. It's the assumptions made in the source systems. It's the quality of our storage system. It's the ability to put it back should something go wrong. What I'd like everyone to do, everyone that took time to attend this, just take a few minutes today and think about it. As you go through the rest of your day, try to let it pop back into your mind. Is what I'm viewing right now affecting the health of my data? You might find that it is. And just yesterday, we didn't even realize it did. Thank you very much for attending today. My name is Doug. I'm the practice manager for Simplex-dba. We have more of our online webinars coming up soon, as Bob showed at the beginning of the presentation, and we hope that you can join us for it. Thank you very much, everyone.